On a cold winter night in 2002, several people called the police in Surrey, England to report witnessing the same accident. A car had veered off the road. Upon investigation, police did find a car, one that had been missing for 5 months, but no trace of any accident on that night. Was this a case of a paranormal encounter or a strange coincidence? Today, we're discussing the A3 ghost crash. This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force, to another episode of Red Web, the podcast all about unsolved mysteries, true crime, and the unknown. I am your resident mystery enthusiast, Trevor Collins, and joining me, hearing this case for the very first time, Alfredo Diaz.
Okay, here we go. Ghost car.
Yeah, ghost car.
All right, dude. I've seen the movie Cars, but now we got a...
All right. Keep going.
All right. This is Lightning McQueen. Went missing, popped back up.
Mm-hmm.
We got to solve the case. Correct me if I'm wrong. It seemed like the car was reported missing. They never found the car. The person with the vehicle was also reported missing. Never found them or the vehicle. And then it popped back up.
Yeah, for the car that was found, I believe that's the case. But otherwise, we're dealing with a really interesting scenario. This kind of reminds me of the SOS sign mystery, where something was reported, and then what was found was actually something else, was a different mystery, a different unsolved thing.
Oh.
But what was reported in this case was never found. It was kind of ethereal. And so it's kind of reminds me of that. And this actually this is a suggested topic by Kyle Buckland, who kind of had the same thing to say. So thank you, Kyle, for sending this to us so we could crack open this case. But yeah, that's the scenario we're working with.
Yeah, I mean, so then obviously the questions are, what happened? Why is it popping up now? Was it a case of just like someone ran away and then they've been just living on their own, doing their own thing? The time doesn't seem like massive in comparison. You said about 5 months?
5 months, yeah.
That's not too much time. It's not like the car turned up 10 years later. You could have, teenagers that wanted, I just want to run away from my family. They're feeling very emotional. They're finding out who they are. And then, 5 months, they could do that. They could probably handle that and then pop back up again. So I don't think it's a substantial amount of time. So I'm very interested to see like the condition of the car. Is there any clues as to the shape of the vehicle leading to any type of theories? And so a lot of questions already, per usual.
Very good questions. We're going to uncover as much as possible. Now, as always, I want to be very forthcoming about the sources for this one. There's a lot of limited information from the original investigation on this particular case. There's a lot of missing details, and I'm kind of giving this blanket statement at the top because I don't want to stop after every reported claim and give some sort of caveat. But due to this, there's going to be some missing key information, some theoretical details. And so we'll kind of talk as we hit some of those snags and the implications therein. But really, as we approach this case, I kind of look at this almost as the origin of folklore in the area. And from within this, we're going to talk a lot about the paranormal theories of how ghosts manifest, if you believe in ghosts, what's actually going on there. If you can try to scientifically analyze that, there's a lot of interesting theories with that. But otherwise, yeah, let's talk about the incident that happened, the calls that came in, the subsequent investigation or discovery, and everything we could possibly know about it, and then dive into those theories. Now, as we dive in, I want to give a huge shout out over to redwebpod.com. That is the number one way to support us. This week on our Patreon, we are celebrating our upcoming 5-year anniversary, Fredo. When we first set out to do this, 5 years is a long time.
It's a long, long time.
Yeah.
And to grow and evolve and build this community has been amazing, to be honest.
Amazing. Yeah. So with that, kind of looking backwards a little bit to celebrate our 1-year indieversary and to celebrate our 5-year anniversary coming up, Alfredo and I did a cast commentary on Lake City Quiet Pills. So we revisit the episode for the first time in 5 years. That comes out this Wednesday. And then on Friday, we have another gameplay in our newest series exclusive to our Patreon called Fieldwork. And that is a Christian-run series. Christian Young is our producer for the podcast, and he also kind of picks up some horror games for us to play. And that's kind of our safe simulation, so we can test out our ghost busting skills in the VR simulator, so to speak.
Yeah, good times, man. We're expanding, and it's been awesome to do, and you guys have been loving it. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And also, Sippy Cup Pro. Get your knowledge today at sippycup.pro. It's a real website. All right.
You gotta send me my pro so I can put my thing in my pro. It doesn't.
What is that off-brand pro?
This is off-brand pro. I don't like it, and it's been vandalized. They wrote "yum" on the side. God.
Yeah, we got to throw up some sensor bars to hide the non-pro cup that Alfredo's got.
Yeah, we have to censor the audio. It's so ugly. I do want to write "yum" on the side of mine now. Okay, let's dive in now to the A3 ghost crash. So, this goes all the way back to 2002. It was the night of December 11th, and the police department in Surrey, England, received an influx of calls reporting some sort of accident, a car going off the road. Around 7:20 p.m. that night, it's reported that several people dialed 999 to report that a car had somehow lost control on the A3, veering off the road approximately 10 meters or 32 feet before what's called a slip road in Burpham Guildford in a small town in Surrey.
So is a slip road just like a very harsh condition road, or?
That's a good instinct. It's kind of like an on-ramp or an off-ramp is what we would call it in America. So a slip road is essentially a stretch of road that allows for cars to enter and exit the highway, sort of like that.
Yeah.
And we actually have a picture so you can get a really good visual of what we're talking about.
Oh, a slip road.
It's not the exact slip road, but it gives you an idea of the kind of area we're working with.
I forgot this is a different country. So
right.
I was like, okay, because on the left side is the, I guess, off-ramp.
Uh-huh.
And then it's just reversed. And so I was like, wait, why are they coming towards the car? That doesn't make, no, that makes sense.
In post, we'll mirror the image to help your American brain.
Yes. It's like, it's all backwards. I think it'd be a car accident.
But you're right. This is in England. They drive on the left side of the road, so it's a little bit different. I think we're the odd ones out, to be fair, globally.
Yes, globally, we're different for sure.
Yeah.
Same thing with like how we measure speed and everything like that. Everyone's got like kilometers and we're...
Yeah. I've driven up to Canada before and it's like, oh, that's kind of confusing. But, you know. Anyway, as far as the location, we have a slip road here, and the A3 is a major road in England that connects Portsmouth to London. It's kind of like a highway. There's many of those radial roads coming out of London. Now, this case wasn't widely reported on, and as such, there's some missing details, like I said, and there's some minor differences that the reports have as far as like the number of callers. Some say several, some say one. Another detail that's a little different is that some people said that, hey, this car veered off 10 meters prior to this slip road situation, whereas others said it actually happened further up the road around 100 meters. Not a huge disparity or anything, but something I wanted to kind of outline because it could, just depending on where the car is in relation to the slip road, it could be a blind spot, somebody else coming on or off or what have you. And so that 90-meter difference could give you different ideas of how the car crashed. On top of that, in these reports, it was unclear, and this was so frustrating for me, it was so unclear what the make, model, or even the color of the car was supposedly supposed to be. This plays into a theory that I kind of whipped up last minute. At the very end of this episode, I'll talk about it. But yeah, there's no published reports of the description of the car that supposedly went off on this particular night. So, after the handful of reports came in, police were dispatched to investigate, of course. But when they arrived at the scene, there was no evidence of a crash in the location that the calls described. It's also important to note that while several reports state that there were multiple callers that night, the identity of each of these callers remains a mystery. Now, normally, you wouldn't know every Tim, Huck, and Barry. I don't know, what's this phrase?
Tim, Huck, and Barry?
I don't know.
I was like, am I learning a new phrase today?
There's like a Tim, John, and Steve. I don't know, whatever the phrase
Tim,
is.
Huck, and Barry.
There's someone who's got the name Huckleberry, and I just broke it in half.
Yeah, you did.
Anyway, normally when a police situation unfolds, everyone's reporting the thing isn't being publicized. But it's interesting that there's just no idea of who reported this. The police don't even know, it seems. Because like if you witness a crash, normally you'll want to linger around to say, oh, right here, officer, this is what happened. Somebody was cut off, what have you. But it seems like whoever reported this is mysterious, unknown, and was no longer at the scene, is all I want to say.
Also, maybe people got stuff to do.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but, you know, it's like, hey, call reported. I got to head home, take care of kids or whatnot, and so not necessarily have the capability to stay around.
Right. I mean, a man named Huck, super busy. With a
Very
name like
busy.
that, you got to be in demand.
Yeah, yes, you do. Strong name, Huck. Tim, Huck, and Barry.
We could have cut it, and now it's canon. Yeah, so what was interesting then, okay, police arrived at the scene, mysterious callers gone in the wind, what have you. And according to reports, there were no tire marks on the road that would indicate, right, that a car had gone off. But in
Right.
addition to that, as you can see kind of in this image, but on the A3, it is pretty thick with shrubs and foliage near the road, not the whole time, but in the area that this accident supposedly happened in. And none of the brush, foliage, trees, or anything were marred, marked, bent in any way. It was all undisturbed. And so for all intents and purposes, it seemed that nothing happened in this particular area.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of almost like placed there.
Yeah. Basically, all right, we got a report, car went off the road, but there's no evidence what to speak of here. And so, I mean, officers being very thorough still canvassed the area.
There was also multiple people reporting it, though.
Multiple people, yeah.
Interesting. It is ghost car.
It is ghost car. Remember, it could be one. We don't know. Maybe the ghost did it. I'm going off the road. Ah, and then they fade
They're
away.
like, they'll spend years trying to figure that one out.
Man, that's a Fredo move. You die and
Oh,
you start doing
100%.
some sort of prank moves. You muster up 15 years of energy just to like call the police and be like, the car, the I-35. And then you just fade.
Oh, yeah, then I'm gone. I'm fade. I sit back and watch the chaos unfold. That's what I do. I'd have a great afterlife.
Yeah, well, okay. So let's all, in the next 70 to 80 years, be mindful that ghosts might get more active. Okay. This episode of Red Web is sponsored by Rocket Money. When it comes to spending money, sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind. Like that daily coffee habit, those streaming subscriptions, they can add up fast even when you're not noticing. Rocket Money helps you spot these patterns so you can do something about them and keep your money in your pocket. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. See all of your subscriptions in one place and know exactly where your money's going. For ones you don't want anymore, Rocket Money can help you cancel them. I use Rocket Money to collate all my different cards so I can see every single month what money is coming in and what money is coming out, also where it's going. I love that they categorize it. That's something I've never really thought about doing. And the fact that they can do that so easily for you, it's just smart. So if you're spending a lot on entertainment, if your costs go up 1 month or if your savings go up 1 month, you kind of get some good insight as to what's going on in your bank account. And I love that. I've never really had that, and Rocket Money has been super helpful. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when they use all the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Download the Rocket Money app and enter our show name, Red Web, in the survey so they know we sent you. We'll get that cred and you'll get to save that money. Don't wait. Download the Rocket Money app today and tell them you heard about them from our show, Red Web. This episode of Red Web is sponsored by Select Quote. Have you ever heard of the Slayer rules? This is a real thing. These are legal provisions that prevent people from inheriting property or benefiting from the estate of the person they murdered. One of the things they protect is someone getting killed for their life insurance policy, and it makes you realize just how important life insurance is, doesn't it? Thanks to Select Quote, you can get your own life insurance for the cost of a streaming service. Select Quote takes the guesswork out of finding the right insurance policy. You don't have to sort through dozens of confusing options on your own, sorting through all these different websites and getting a bunch of emails trying to figure it out. Instead, one of their licensed agents will find you the right policy at the right price for you. And you're not out of luck if you have pre-existing health conditions, because Select Quote partners with companies that offer policies for people with conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, or heart disease. Now that I'm working independently here with Red Web, these are the types of things that aren't really fun to talk about, but Select Quote is something that has been so convenient to make sure that I can find a policy that protects my family. They find the policy that fits the budget that I'm looking for and would cover me given my lifestyle and my needs. It's just nice to know that I can find the right policy and somebody else is going to help me do that. I don't need to search through a bunch of different websites, right? Life insurance is never cheaper than it is today. Get the right life insurance for you for less and save more than 50% at selectquote.com/redweb. Save more than 50% on term life insurance at selectquote.com/redweb today to get started. That's selectquote.com/redweb. So police are on the scene. They see no evidence of a car going off, but they're being officers of the law. They're being very thorough, and they canvass the area. And when doing this, they're looking for, of course, any sign of a crashed vehicle up and down the road, when suddenly, just 20 meters away from the initial location, the one that they were called to, they found a maroon Vauxhall Astra nose down in a ditch.
Oh, it's a car.
Yeah, a Vauxhall's a car, usually seen in Europe, but go ahead and take a look. We have an image of this, and don't worry, it's not too graphic. It's pretty hidden away, so to speak, but this is a shot of officers finding it. The car is pretty obscured, but suffice to say, it's in that bottom left corner.
Yeah, it's just like in a little ditch, maroon colored car, and yeah, the officers are wearing like greenish yellow jackets.
Yeah, that high vis.
The high vis jackets. But yeah, there's the vehicle. They found it.
Yeah, well, a vehicle, right? And so they don't know if this is the one. So they're like, all right, we do have a car here. A car was reported having gone off here. Let's take a look. So the car itself that they found, the Astra, was completely hidden from the road, past the first line of trees and brush. And near the car, morbidly, there was a decomposing body. And they discovered the identity was 21-year-old Christopher Brian Chandler, who had, as you instinctively assumed earlier on, had been reported missing by his family 5 months earlier. So Chandler, let's talk about him for a little bit. He was last seen on July 16th, drinking with friends in Hounslow, which is an area of West London. And it's also been reported that Chandler was from Middlesex, which is in the central northern part of London. Although it's not really clear if at the time of this accident that's where he was living. We kind of wanted to create a triangle of where Chandler was going, we know where the crash was, and we know where he lived and was last seen. So we kind of wanted to figure out a lay of the land to figure out the story for him, and maybe then how that played into this ghost report. So It's unknown why he was driving in Surrey, continuing even further west in the opposite direction of Middlesex. So again, to recount, he was last seen in West London. He potentially lived in central northern London, and where this car is crashed and positioned, it would indicate that he's continuing further west. Maybe your gut check was right. Maybe he was fleeing the coop, going out on his own. Maybe it was a night of partying. We won't really know. That's a mystery in and of itself. And on the night of Chandler's crash, again, this is 5 months prior, supposedly his phone had made a 1-second call to his brother. We tried to look into this further because a lot of the sources cite that this comes from phone records. We were unable to find any original phone records for Chandler, or if it was a 1-second connected call, like somebody picks up the phone and says, hey, and then it hangs up after a second, or if it was ringing for a second. That's also something we couldn't delineate.
Yeah, it's such a finite detail. Yeah, you're not really going to know that.
Yeah. So right now, this mystery crashed car report has turned into, well, we found somebody who was missing. We don't know what happened with that initial report, but we're at least able to pull together some of this other mystery. And when looking at the scene, due to the extent of his injuries and the positioning of his body, this is where it gets kind of morbid. It's theorized that Chandler might have survived the crash and crawled out of the wrecked vehicle to try to make it back to the main road, maybe to flag somebody down or to get some sort of help. But in doing so, succumbed to his injuries before he was able to kind of contact anybody else.
Interesting. Because then why not, I don't know, use the phone to dial emergency services? I
mean, if you're mortally wounded, it's possible that just might not either A, cross your mind, or you're just too incapacitated to do something so dexterous.
True.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, that's the risk you take, right? You get into a car accident, you're hurting pretty badly. You don't know if there's internal bleeding, if you should try to go to a hospital ASAP, or take the risk of trying to get yourself to the side of the road, but then that could make things worse.
Right.
You know, like maybe you shouldn't be moving at all. It's just, you just don't know.
Yeah, dude. That's the first thing that comes to mind when somebody has such a traumatic car crash or body accident where if someone's trying to pick them up in the movies, I'm like, whoa, let's not move yet. We don't know what's going on.
Yeah, you have no idea what's happening internally, and that could be the worst thing that you could do.
Right. So to kind of wrap up now, this suddenly stumbled into mystery that they are now closing. The identity of the body was later confirmed via dental records and the car, which itself was definitely registered to Chandler. So that kind of closes the loop on Chandler as a missing person. Now, to add more confusion to this case, some reports claim that he was wanted by police for robbery and was on the run. That's neither here nor there. I don't want to, insult someone's memory if we don't have hard facts. Either way, with Chandler's crash dating back to 5 months prior, right? Again, 5 months earlier, I bring us back to the A3 crash on December 11th. What did witnesses see that night? And this is where we're going to get into a lot of interesting discussions in the theories. Fred, I'm very interested in your kind of gut check here, but what could it be? What are the theories that attempt to answer this? And we have everything from the paranormal to more practical. And I have something kind of out of pocket that I think could answer some questions here. But again, with so few details, it's built on assumptions like a lot of this is. So with that, what are you thinking?
I mean, I have no idea. You know what I mean? It could have been that they did see something, but it wasn't such a drastic issue, and so they, just kept driving off. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't necessarily have to mean that it was this big, huge, tragic thing.
Yeah, dude. That is actually probably, I know I cite Occam's razor, probably wrong half the time, but like the explanation that takes the fewest assumptions is likely Occam's razor to be the one. And honestly, if people saw in the rearview mirror some headlights go off, but that person didn't fully crash, maybe they didn't skid mark, maybe they didn't hit the trees and brush, but recovered and were able to get back on the road and leave prior to cops arriving. Honestly, that makes probably the most sense. That is a very astute theory that doesn't have to get too wild with it. And then it becomes hyper coincidence, but then they stumble into somebody nearby who happened to wreck 5 months earlier.
Right. Because like I said, there wasn't necessarily hard evidence that there was a crash, right? There wasn't chippings of a car, broken glass, etc. So they could have saved themselves and then just kept going. Because, they're not going to sit there and assume that police were coming or that people reported it. I would have just been gone. Like, oh my goodness, that was terrifying.
Right.
Anyways, I'm going to get home now.
Right. Like I've hydroplaned and spun a little bit and then recovered and went,
yeah,
that was terrifying, and then kept going.
Right. You didn't think to yourself, like, I should stop on the side of the road. Maybe someone,
Yeah. Like if somebody saw a snippet of that, they might have panicked.
Right.
But then but if they crested the hill and no longer saw me, then they wouldn't know that I recovered. I don't know. Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting theory. I think I like that a lot. But
okay.
But that doesn't stop the internet from going wild with it.
Oh no, not at all.
The story, the intrigue, the coincidence was enough for this to develop a bit of folklore locally, but also, as you can imagine, this hit headlines across all the newspapers, across all the local news stations. So let's talk about the most prominent theory, the most, I would say, loud theory. And within that, there's going to be some fun conversations for both believers and skeptics alike. I like to get real metaphysical with it, but let's talk about it. Upon hearing of this incident, local news outlets began to suspect a paranormal aspect was at play, thus coining the term ghost crash for this one. Some reports state that this crash, or lack thereof, might have been the start of local folklore. It's believed that what people saw that night was the replay or some sort of after image of Chandler's crash that occurred 5 months prior, basically a ghostly apparition of something that actually happened.
Oh.
Now, this would in turn draw attention to the crash site, leading to the discovery of Chandler's body as a resolution to his case. Now, many people who believe in the paranormal would point to the fact that there was no evidence to say, well, there's no tire marks, all the foliage appears untouched, therefore, this is the most likely theory in their minds, right? Mm-hmm. And I love the theory. I think it's wildly fascinating. But man, you know me, I'm out here waiting for that crumb, that nugget, that little tangible, hard piece of evidence that's undeniable.
Right. I love just, thinking of wild and out there theories and stories. But you got to give me just a little bit of something.
Little bit of something.
Little bit of something.
Yeah.
If anything, I'm like, that's a cool theory.
Yeah.
I don't subscribe to it because there's no weight to it, but go on.
Yeah. I mean, do I want to hold hands with a ghost walk down the beach and maybe find myself with an ethereal kiss? I don't know.
Could be
Someday.
under the moonlight.
Listen, it can only be under the moonlight. They only come out at the witching hour. This episode of Red Web is sponsored by Mint Mobile. You know what doesn't belong in your epic summer plans? Getting burned by your old wireless bill. While you're planning beach trips, barbecues, and 3-day weekends, your wireless bill should be the last thing holding you back, and that's why you should switch to Mint Mobile. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Switching has never been easier. Ditch the overpriced wireless and get 3 months of unlimited service from Mint Mobile for $15 a month. I actually just switched my old phone over to Mint Mobile, and I have to say, I live in a bit of a dead area, and so I have calls that drop sometimes on competing networks. Haven't had that issue yet with Mint Mobile. I do really appreciate that. Plus the fact that it's still unlimited and the monthly fee is so much lower. It's just, should I say, Mint Task Force. This year, skip breaking a sweat and breaking the bank. Get this new customer offer and your 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/redweb. That's mintmobile.com/redweb. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent of $15 a month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. This is where my intrigue kind of gets piqued. Do I believe that this was Chandler's soul reenacting the crash to draw attention to his resting place for some sort of closure for his family? That is entirely possible. We don't know everything about the world. It is unlikely in my personal book, but with that, I think it opens up some really interesting conversations about what ghosts are. We've had these chats in the past before, but I felt like this would be an interesting time to kind of go back over it, because the ghost crash idea was leading to a media frenzy, and many people widely regarded this ghost crash theory as the leading one. And the reason why I think it sticks is because there's some sub-theories that it can be attached to. For example, right, the idea of residual hauntings, sometimes called psychic impressions. These are said to be moments where spirits repeatedly perform actions that they might have done in their life, somewhat like they're stuck in a loop. One example of this is actually quite local at the Old Driscoll Hotel here in Austin, Texas. There is said to be the ghost of a woman who is moving flowers from one table to another. And this is happening in the lobby. This has been seen by many people. And this does mirror something that actually used to happen in the lobby when it was oriented a different way, where a table used to be where this ghost goes to and from. I would say, taking it at face value, if this is an accident, it is a high energy moment, but it's not something that, Mr. Chandler would have done many times. So seeing it as being stuck in a loop may be harder to kind of subscribe to, but it is an interesting angle.
Yeah, we could also have the counter argument of like something intense, like an intense moment, a high emotional moment could create an echo.
Yeah.
It's all theories, right, on what creates an echo.
That's true. Yeah.
But for the most part, when you do hear about an echo, it's something that was repeated, or maybe something that they did throughout their day, often a habit of sorts.
Yeah. Something that would almost, like, at least for the residual haunting kind of thing, kind of carve their name in the tree of time. So that way it can be seen by others long after they're gone. But one angle that you're talking about is kind of closer to, and I didn't have a name for it until I was looking into this. It's called the stone tape theory. And the idea here is that the emotional energy of a moment, of a time, of an event can get stuck in an object like stones and walls, like when we were at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park over in Colorado. Underneath that hotel is a large amount of quartz. And so it's widely believed that quartz in particular can pull a lot of that energy and holds on to it quite well. And the idea here is that the stone tape theory, much like an actual tape, it can replay that energy later on, and it gives the impression of a ghostly apparition or an otherworldly encounter. An example of this, a much more mundane example, would be like hearing footsteps on the stairs or in the attic when no one's home, another interesting angle on this is definitely a lot more metaphysical, and it's called the time slip theory. It's also kind of very similar to the multiverse theory, but the idea here is that, so let's just assume all infinite timelines are moving in parallel to one another, right? This theory states that perhaps some maybe slightly out of sync timeline, say 5 months shifted, just happened to merge with ours for a brief moment. And so a moment that happened in one played out in another. So that way it enabled people driving down the road to see this crash that happened 5 months prior. But then obviously it's over and done.
Right. Like it is in a different parallel.
Yeah, that would be like in another reality is kind of like, again, that sub theory that creates that ghostly impression.
Oh,
yeah.
Now we're bringing hard science into this.
Well, theoretical science.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, hard theoretical science.
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
It's, I could see that. Who's to say that we have one universe, one timeline, that choices don't branch off over to other things?
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting, and it attempts to answer the more popular theory, the more viral theory on this case. Of course, there's a lot of assumptions baked into each and every one of those things, but I don't know, man. As much as I'm a skeptic and debunk things, a sliver of me as the task force, as you guys know, it's like science attempts to answer everything it possibly can, but there is a barrier that leads to the unknown that we're always pushing into. And then I think what the paranormal is just forever lives in that unknown, and it recedes into the recesses of the unknown. So they're always trying to meet and explain the same thing. But I find that ghost stories, aliens, whatever, will always live in that sliver of that moving kind of field of the known and the unknown. And so one day I'm hoping they're going to touch and we're going to be like, bam, that's an alien and you can't deny it. Or bam, that's a ghost. I live for that day. But otherwise, I'm not just going to call a ghost just because I want it to be,
Also, like, as much as I want it to, I'm like a little terrified in terms of how people are going to handle it.
Ooh, that's a very interesting point.
I feel like it's going to spin a lot of people into chaos. That's shake the reality of like, we're not the only ones here. If there's aliens, like, I don't know, like, why would you assume that we're the only ones?
Yeah, dude.
But then also people are going to be like, oh my God, they're going to bring diseases or we're going to be conquered or.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, so I get the fear, but it's also something. It's like, what evidence do we have that that's happening? You're, worrying about the future instead of looking at the present. You'll always be in a state of worry if you do that, or can be. And then on top of that, if you have ghosts and stuff, I think that's going to be less chaotic and more people trying to contact their beloved ones that have since passed.
Yeah.
And boy, oh boy, will we see the monetization on that. Everyone's like, I can contact them. Is there a parent you want to talk to? Like, come over to me. And
that's already happening, my friend.
Right.
But even more so. Yeah.
More so. Like, it would be vastly, hugely accelerated.
Religions would be completely shaken. New religions would start up and like.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, that's the big thing. Religions would be shaken up.
I'll be honest, I would fear a Pulse type situation. And Task Force, if you haven't seen Pulse, we cover that in Movie Club. We break down that plot and everything, so you can go take a look. Jillian picked that one out. The original Pulse or the more recent Kristen Bell remake, I don't know, but that would be terrifying. Ghosts coming in from the other side saying, it's too crowded here. We're coming back. We're coming back to the planet and pulling you in.
That was such a good concept for a movie.
Oh, yeah. Those are the ideas that you live to wish you could have, like how do people think like that? All right, so let's talk about some other theories here. A little bit more grounded, perhaps less fun, but still trying to answer the question of what happened that night on the A3. So some believe that what people actually saw that night was not a car that crashed, but rather headlights that turned in a certain way, only making it look like a car might have gone off the road. We don't know the exact slip road that the person might have gone off on or gone on to, but it's possible that somebody looking in their rearview mirror might have seen it a type of way, but it was actually maybe kind of similar to your theory, Fredo. It was actually a lot less dramatic, and maybe it was somebody kind of pulling a U-ey, maybe an illegal maneuver on the highway, but if it's at night, no one's around, maybe they thought they could get away with it. And so you see headlights moving in a way that's unusual, but otherwise it's not a crash, some sort of illusion.
Yeah, and maybe that's just me being more dismissive, but I don't necessarily think I would stop and call authorities and be like, I think there's a crash on the road. Probably could and should to be safe, but I mean, to be honest, I probably would not, you know? I'd be like, oh, okay. I saw headlights. They kind of went a weird way. I think they're fine. If someone else passes, I'd like to say I'd be less passive about the situation, but I feel like I would be passive about it.
Well, yeah. And I mean, you're coming at it with a lot of hindsight, again, as usual. And I can imagine somebody in the moment being panicked. You know, myself, I might consider calling the non-emergency number. They usually push you over to the 911 emergency number, but more of a way to like, hey, there's something that might be worth scooting by if someone's in the area, as opposed to a more of an alarming angle. But people actually have cited the theory that you kind of indicated, which, yeah, maybe it was an illusion of somebody that veered off, took control, and off they went, and everything was fine. And so the more practical reason for what might have happened that night, but it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to jump in here with kind of my theory. I want to admit that I'm completely making this up based on all the unknowns of the Chandler crash. It does resolve the ghost crash in a more practical way, but it's building, again, on assumptions with all these missing gaps. So it's very short, but imagine somebody who saw, caused, or was somehow involved in Chandler's crash 5 months prior. Imagine now that they see that crash goes undiscovered and unreported on. And so maybe 5 months later on, they go, well, someone needs to know about this, but I don't want to be implicated as somebody who knew about this missing person, about this crash, and didn't say anything. So let me just say, oh, hey, police, Huck, Officer Huck, you, there was a crash at this spot. Anyway, bye. And then they kind of key the police into that moment, into that spot, indirectly pushing the police to go discover it themselves. So,
oh, big, like, anonymous, probably felt the weight of guilt setting upon them.
yeah, or something.
Yeah, I could see that.
You know, again, that assumes something happened like with a witness 5 months ago, you know, what have you. So there's some gaps in there, but it's another one of those kind of grounded ones that I was like, okay, well, I can imagine this being a possibility, but it really has no hard evidence to go off of, except for the fact that we don't know who reported it, and that some of the sources claim one person reported it, while some say several. So that's really the only thing I'm going off of, is the anonymity and the single caller.
Yeah, but it is a theory that I like, though. Of like, they saw it, maybe we're a part of it, and then we're like, oh goodness, like this person is there and they're not able to rest or whatever, and the guilt, in my mind, that's the path it took.
Yeah.
In order to like call and put yourself back out there.
Yeah. Because if you're like, oh man, there's a car crash in there, and I don't want to say I knew about it, but like, hey police, look over there, and then they smoke bomb, you know?
Yeah, and I'm gone. I've done my, you know, now my conscience is cleared. I can move forward.
Yeah, especially, now again, I don't want to character assassinate someone we don't have a lot of information on, but if we're talking about on the run, robbery, driving west without really knowing what his motive was, could there have been other people in play that caused this accident or were somehow involved? Again, it's all floating unknowns, but it's stuff I was kind of drawing on. Again, I don't know, feels a bit theatrical. But the last thing I wanted to talk about was the concept of modern folklore, because it's not necessarily a theory, but it is one of those fun moments where, you know, we hear about ghost stories from centuries past. We hear about mysteries over the decades, but every now and then when we're talking about unsolved cases, we stumble into a case where we almost get to see the origin story of a ghost story, or what feels like it could be. So let's talk about that. It's been 23 years since the crash, and many articles have reported that this crash, with the strange circumstances that surrounded it, has been cemented in Surrey folklore. Our English task force members, I'd actually be very curious, outside of the person who kindly submitted this to us, Kyle, if you knew about this, and if you knew about it from the news, or if you knew about this from word of mouth, and has the story evolved thus far in your experience? There's a man named Steve Casey who worked for Mako Recovery Services at the time of the crash and was tasked actually with aiding in the recovery of Chandler's vehicle. While he wasn't aware of the context of the crash at the time, he remembers being kind of jarred at the thought of a skeleton being there at the site. And a decade after the incident, Casey was interviewed and stated that he still remembers the crash every single time he drives down the A3 in Burpham. And this just kind of elucidates us to the fact that shocking moments like these certainly stick in the mind, especially when it is such a compelling story that it makes the news cycle, that it might have even outlandish elements like a ghost car that then reveals like a real car. But regardless of what might have actually happened that night, this story, I think, will forever remain a piece of local folklore, and I wouldn't be surprised.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if this story continues to evolve over the years as generations pass it on. It's one of those things that, when you're a kid, one of the lies is, my dad works at Nintendo, but the other lies are like, just kids saying stuff.
Yeah, just kids saying stuff.
Things they hear.
I mean, the thing is, everyone, loves to talk about, everyone loves to gossip, or a lot of people do. And so this is just like town gossip, folklore, the mysterious this, or every place, every city has something that's haunted that people like to talk about or gossip about. And so, yeah, sure. Definitely. Like folklore. Oh, come on.
Yeah. Or even urban legend. But yeah, this has been the A3 Ghost Crash. I think a wildly catchy hook, a wildly intriguing story, and it deeply reminds me of the SOS sign mystery. We did a whole episode on that task force, but if you're new to our podcast, we've had a lot of new listeners lately. Please go back and listen to that. But just to catch you up, it is in Japan, and someone goes missing in a forest. A helicopter sees a giant SOS sign out of cut down trees. They go to investigate. They find the people who were missing, but they had nothing to do with the SOS sign. And it turns out somebody had gone missing many years prior who they themselves made the SOS sign. And so less ghostly, but still one of those kind of moments where like, how did the odds work out like that?
Right. What a wild, coincidence. Absolutely good story on that one too.
Very, very compelling. A few theories within that. Who was the person? How did this all unfold? Lots of nooks and crannies to dig into. But as we come to the end of the podcast, I would be remiss if we didn't shout out some of our task force members that support us directly, keep this podcast going 1 year on. We're going to celebrate, I think, more the birthday of the podcast. This 5-year anniversary is coming up. We have a huge stream coming. So stay tuned as we unveil some details around that. Lots of things in the works. But this week, I want to shout out a few buff scientists. We have Drew Bison, Pedro A., and Xantarius, to name a few of them. And then, of course, our squonks of the week are Sabrina Hall and Zachary Orr. Thank you all so much for your direct support. And just while we're here, while we're talking about it, you might see it on the screen. We've done a few tweaks, some updates to the Patreon. Every tier has something new as of a few weeks ago. We're always kind of rolling out some new stuff to thank you all for your direct support, but also just have fun with you guys in this wonderful community. We have Fieldwork, like I said, that's Christian's gameplay series where we play a lot of horror games. We also have Break Room, where Fredo hosts, and we kind of break down what we're doing behind the scenes, what's going on in our lives, and you can be part of that live recording every month. Fredo, what else is going on right now?
We got Movie Club.
We're
watching down all kinds of different movies, whether they're good or bad. We are even spanning out into monsters and cryptids and whatnot. So there's all kinds of movies to explore, or just, you want to hear us break it down. Maybe you don't want to watch a scary movie, but you'd like for us to talk about it and give our opinions about it. So we do that.
It's a great way to watch or relive or just skip watching a movie because we get into all the details you need, plus our reactions, what we loved, what we hated. We have a great time, lots of laughs. But you can get all of that and much more like this podcast ad-free at redwebpod.com. So come check us out, come hang out with us. And Fredo, with that said, I'll see you right back here next Monday for yet another mystery.